Road.
I'll make that in the form of a motion.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capoletti. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, thank you, Supervisor DePiero. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, I have a brief introduction. The purpose of this hearing is to consider a zoning map and amendment application for 2311 Old Arch Road located in the AR Residential District for the Gospel Highway segment. Better Home Incorporated, the applicant, has requested amendment of East Orange Township zoning map to change the zoning classification of parcel number 3300013305 from residential, AR residential to CR residential, where the applicant proposes to construct 40 townhomes. They would also like to do a request for the amendment of section 205-37 and 205-38 of the East Orange Township zoning ordinance concerning building height and building setback for the development of the CR residential district. Mr. Solicitor, could you go through the exhibits?
Sure. Thank you very much, Supervisor McDevitt. We'll mark as Township 1 a copy of the advertisement of this hearing, T2 a copy of recommendation from our planning agencies, T3 a copy of the application requesting the zoning changes and map changes, T4 a copy of the ordinances in question. Just so the public understands this evening how the flow of the evening will go, there will be a presentation from the applicant. The applicant may or may not want to call any witnesses related to this hearing. There will be an opportunity for questions from the Board of Supervisors to the applicant's attorney or any witnesses, and then an opportunity for the public to comment. The Board of Supervisors then can go ahead and close the public hearing, and as you see later under old business, there are 2 potential action items. Or if there are additional questions that are not to the satisfaction of the Board of Supervisors, they may continue this public hearing to a later date. At this time, I would like to turn it over to the applicant's attorney, Mr. Jonas, for a presentation. And did you have any exhibits? It seems like you have some exhibits, Mr. Jonas. There you go. Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna mark this as A1, this exhibit book index, noting that there are 13 tabs within it, so that is clear for the record.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Good evening. I'm Mark Jonas. Mr. Sivertson has passed down the exhibit booklet. He and I represent the applicant on this request for legislative changes of the map and the text amendment. We appeared in front of the Planning Commission last week, and the Planning Commission unanimously recommended that the board adopt the amendments, and hopefully you will agree when we do a PowerPoint presentation tonight. That'll be relatively succinct. Our project team is here with the developer, the project engineer, and the traffic engineer as well. So with that, if I could, if we could just start with the PowerPoint on slide 1. We looked at this from a bunch of vantage points. The township staff was very helpful in providing us with historical districts. We thought it'd be helpful, not only obviously to know the character of the neighborhood and what's been developed around there, but to take a look at what the history has been of zoning changes. And there have been a marked number of zoning changes in this area of Old Arch Road. This is the 1981 zoning map. You can see 2311 Old Arch Road delineated with basically surrounded by what is the AR zoning, which is the zoning of this tract of ground. Next slide, please. So in 1995, this is the zoning map, and this shows a series of about 80 different tax parcels that were rezoned from AR to something else. 10 parcels from AR to RP, 3 from AR to CR. CR is a district that we are asking you to consider for this slightly almost 8 acre tract. The park, which is in AR across the street, that was acquired by East Orange Township in that period of time 46 parcels are rezoned from AR to MR, 33 parcels were rezoned to BR from AR, and this is 1995. Then in 2005, 100 different tax parcels of varying sizes were rezoned from AR to EC2, the Executive Campus 2 district. That is actually on two sides of our property, and I'll discuss that very briefly. That is the reserve. Next, please. And then in 2017, down the road, one parcel was rezoned from AR to BR1. I think that's about 14 dwelling units on that tract. Next, please. So this is a pretty interesting composite of what happened, at least what we were able to track since 1981. All of these instances were changes of zoning from AR to different zoning classifications. So it occurred to us when we looked at the neighborhood, we saw how the neighborhood had been developed, and we looked at the history, that this might be appropriate for the township to consider a consistent zoning change for this tract of ground. Next, please. This is a context map. I'm sure you know this neighborhood. For those of us who travel to and from Norristown, in my profession, we have occasion to do that from time to time. We're familiar certainly with Old Arch Road. You see 2311 at the bottom of this slide. Then you have the reserve at Penn Crossing. This is EC2. And then a little bit to the north, the Jamestown development, which is very interestingly Zone CR. Again, the zoning district that we are asking you to consider. There is also, we can go back a second, there's a old historical building that has commercial uses in the past that's right north of our site. It appears to be a 3-story building. It is very close to the road. It's a retaining wall, as you know, and that just helps you with the context of this development. Thank you. Next. This is a snapshot of the reserve at Penn Crossing. Again, this is the EC2 that's on two sides of our tract. Multi-family, beautiful development, very nicely executed. Next, please. This is the commercial building at 2315 to our north. Next, please. This is Jamestown. This is a CR. Also, you can see how the units are configured in terms of the width. They have third-story dormers. This is Jamestown Zone CR. Another snapshot of the Jamestown development to our north, Zone CR. This is just to give you a sample of what our proposed townhouses, that we have a rendering at the end, is a little bit larger compared to the reserve and to Jamestown. Again, because these are legislative changes, it's important to look at this from a planning point of view, and are these changes consistent with the character of the neighborhood and the way the property has been developed. I think we'll be looking at the concept plan. We've done a lot of due diligence on this plan, even though this is a concept plan, this is not land development. When the details of construction are done, we have gone into a lot of depth in terms of what this will look like. We met with the County Planning Commission before we issued this letter. We listened to comments at the Planning Commission meeting, and we've actually made some adjustments and lessened some of the requests that we made initially when we filed. Next, please. So we took a look at the existing zoning districts, and particularly we looked at EC2, which is on our two sides, which is the zoning of the reserve. EC2 is an interesting district. It has a number of standards and parameters that seem to be based on EC2 throughout the township, but what was most significant to us was that EC2 provides for a number of non-residential uses, and we didn't think that was necessarily the best fit from a planning point of view. So even though EC2 is on two sides of our tract, we felt that was not the appropriate way to go. We looked at CR because Jamestown is right nearby Zone CR. There's another CR zoning to the south, and CR zone is zoned for residential uses primarily, and that seemed to be the right fit given the history of rezonings and the way the neighborhood has been developed. Next, please. So then we went into real depth and took a look at all the other zoning districts. We took a look at obviously CR, BR, BR1, EC2, and MR. It's important to note that our 40 dwelling units will have a density of 5.8 dwelling units per acre. That's essentially the same as BR1. We have, one of the planning commission comments was that they liked the plan, the concept plan, they liked the idea of the 40 units, and they were concerned about, well, maybe it could be 40 or 41, but one of the issues or one of the proposals we would offer to the township and to the township solicitor is what was called a unilateral covenant of restrictions, easements, and conditions, and that would limit the site in the future. It's not something that the township would sign, it's something that we would execute, the landowner would, and it would bind the site to 40 units, not more than 40 units if it were developed. So our density of 5.8 is very close. You'll see the BR1, which is 5.5, and it's really in keeping with what the neighborhood has been developed in the other zoning districts. So we thought that CR again was the right choice because of Jamestown and taking a look at the surrounding properties. Next, please. So here's the site plan. This has been revised even since the planning commission meeting. One of the comments we received related to the text amendment request to make the buildings a little bit closer to the proposed private street. But the comments we received were that they thought perhaps the building should be set back. So we have in fact set the building back to 35 feet. And the text amendment that you have in front of you is for 35 feet as a setback. We also heard comments about walkability. This plan proposes sidewalks on both sides of the interior road. It proposes sidewalks along the frontage of Old Arch Road. Our traffic engineer who's here today, Greg Richardson from TPD, he was involved in previous traffic studies on Old Arch Road. We are considering, and we've talked about maybe a speed table. These are preliminary discussions. This would be done during the land development, be reviewed by the township engineer, crosswalks to the park, all because of the idea of this is residential, the future plans for the township, and to make this as walkable as possible. So we began to adjust the plan. We took a look at landscaping along the street frontage to make sure that we could have a verge of green area and trees. There was a comment about where will we put our utilities so it does not interfere with the greenery, and Mr. Mast, our project engineer who's here, very adeptly moved the buildings back and provided for the utilities in a way that it would not interfere with the green along the streetscape. So then we have the next, please, thanks. This is just the same site plan, again revised with the sidewalks, with the 35-foot building setback, but to give you the context and to show you how we think that this plan really does fit in to the neighborhood and to the zoning. You see the reserve on two sides. You'll also see, and Mr. Mast could answer this question in greater detail. There's always a danger of being a liberal arts major about how far you can go at a public meeting, so I'll watch myself. But the plan was adjusted and shifted so that a large buffer area would be along the single-family homes to the south. We know there was the head of the homeowners association from the reserve appeared in front of the planning commission and was concerned about the existing buffers between this proposed development and the reserve, and that's something certainly we will look at and preserve as part of the land development details and all. There was some really good comments at the planning commission meeting. One had to do with stormwater, concerns about that. That obviously, as you know, is a detail that is done during the subdivision and land development matter. We got some very good input from the planning commission, and as I said, we've adjusted the plan to take into account some of those comments. Next, please. This is a close-up view of the buildings. Keep in mind, again, what we saw for Jamestown and the reserve in terms of the configuration, the size of the building configuration, and this is to give you a closer sense of that with the green area in the front and landscaping in the front, providing enough parking on site for 2 cars in the driveway in addition to a garage. Another question came up, had to do with guest parking. That's something we would need to drill down on during subdivision and land development. Again, this is a concept plan, but I think you'll agree that we've done a lot of detail for a concept plan. You're not approving a plan tonight, you're hopefully approving the ordinance amendment, but we wanted to be able to answer every question we could to address concerns of neighbors and hopefully to convince you that this is the right thing to do. Next, please. And this is the last point of the PowerPoint slide. My target was 15 minutes, Mr. Kilkenny, I don't know how I'm doing, but
You're doing wonderful, Mr. Jones.
I know Mr. Kilkenny will hold rank and tell me if I'm longer than 15 minutes. But this is a larger version of the proposed townhouses. This is actually a rendering of what our client has done in Upper Gwinnett Township. Our project team is here, the developer, the traffic engineer, and the civil engineer to answer any questions. We hope that our due diligence and the work we've done on this will convince you that the map amendment and the text amendment are appropriate for East Norriton Township. Thank you very much. By the way, it wasn't too many years ago, it was many years ago that I actually served as a council for East Norriton Township. I closed down a use on DeKalb Pike that was not very popular at the time. We won't talk about that tonight.
Are there any questions from the Board of Supervisors?
No, I just have a comment, actually. It just seems like you put a lot of work and adjustment into what the planning commission had suggested and their questions and their input, and I just really want to, recognize that and thank you for that. Our planning commission is awesome. So I'm pretty impressed, so thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to also compliment the staff. I mean, you can tell from my advanced age, I've appeared in a lot of municipalities over the years. Staff, Tiffany was really forthcoming in helping us with historical documents and all, and meetings with, it's been a real pleasure to deal with East Norriton Township.
So, Supervisor McDevitt, if there's no questions from the Board of Supervisors, perhaps open it up to the public. Someone will just have to come up to a podium. Please state their name and where they live.
Good evening, David Brunner, 32 Brownstone Drive. I'm the president of the Reserve of Penn Crossing Homeowners Association. I wanted to thank Mr. Jonas for referring to us as the Reserve this time instead of the Cutler Group, as he did so numerous times last week. So, we cringe when we hear that word. We're now the Reserve of Penn Crossing.
I'm sorry.
You're fine. You did good. Had a lot of experience. Couple more comments. I know I spoke last month. Again, this month, just want to put it on the record. Actually, we're going down to just the drainage issue. Just want to put on the record that where they have the storm water management system, there's a very high water table there. I want to make sure that when subdivision and land development meetings take place, that is front and foremost a concern. Second one is the buffer areas, and I'm glad to see that they were not going to change any buffer areas. I actually did talk to the developer last week, and they said they weren't going to, their intention was not to cut down any of the trees between them, so hopefully that handles through. And then the third is just a question, just because I'm not so familiar with this, the subdivision and land development meetings, where are they held? Are they county meetings or are they township
They're here.
meetings? They're here.
They're here.
Okay, so then they'll be publicly noticed for.
You won't necessarily get a notice, like a zoning notice related to that, but the township, it'll be on their website, it will be advertised, and Mr. Hart will probably be in contact with you related to know when this will be on the agenda.
Great.
And on the subdivision and land development issues related to stormwater, perhaps I see our borough engineer, Ms. Goff here, maybe she can briefly give just an understanding for the public as to what kind of analysis is done and how a developer has to meet both local and state standards related to that.
Yes, there are standards that the engineer for this project will have to follow, and we will also consider the height of the water table. They will also be required to do borings in order to uncover the height of the water table and the soils in this area.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Is there any additional? Yep.
Hey, how are you? My name's Dan Goodman. I'm part of I'm the vice president of the HOA at 74 Brownstone Drive at the Reserve of Penn Crossing. So I'm going to borrow the PowerPoint if you don't mind. Would you mind going back to slide 16, whoever's operating? So just to kind of build on what Dave was saying, obviously the water table here is an issue. I live right here. My neighbors to the left of me have constant water flow. They have 3 sump pumps going all the time, and I'm concerned that anything that actually happens here is gonna raise the water table and become an issue for most of the folks. So, I think you guys are doing an excellent job, making sure that we're aware of it. Just really wanted to reinforce that point, how, while this is great, we wanna, make sure that you guys are successful, not to negatively impact the folks that are living there already, from a property value perspective. And to just build on that, Dave also mentioned the boundary. Right now, this is all open greenery, looks nice. I'm sure the next, I don't know how long it's gonna take to build it, but that's gonna be an interesting experience to kind of be really basically 20 feet from massive construction that is probably gonna take a while. So just to the extent that you could, expedite it, in a reasonable amount of time. And then, I don't know if this is the appropriate way to ask, but then finally, in terms of the view, just the aesthetics of how everything looks, this is actually, you can't really see the elevation, but this actually sits up on a hill. So when we have a 35-foot building, right now we have a beautiful view. We're gonna be looking out at lots of buildings, so maybe there's like an opportunity to put trees there or some sort of visual barrier. That would be really appreciated by not just myself, but the folks who actually have to look out, in the backyard and see, just to make sure that it's visually, aesthetically appealing and it doesn't negatively impact the property value. But those are my main concerns that I just wanted to kind of vet out there. Hopefully you guys, sounds like you guys are working on it, so thanks for taking the input and I appreciate it.
And if I can add, we'll work very closely with the
Yeah.
developer and his entire team. And as far as the stormwater issue and the water table, if anything, the goal is going to be to help your situation,
great,
not
yeah.
hurt it. So be assured that'll be all part of our discussion and working through this whole process.
Great, thank you, thanks for listening.
Is there any other additional public comment? Okay, if there's no additional public comment, Chair McDevitt, if you like, you could make a motion to close the public hearing.
Yes, I just want to make sure, do any supervisors have any other comment? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing for 2311 Old Arch Road.
I'll second.
Second by
Supervisor.
Supervisor DeSanto. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, we return to the